Phillips. Thank you for joining us here again.
Dude, it's great to see you again.
It is. It is. How's life been for you?
It's been good, a little busy, but no busier than most. It's been a great year.
When did the snow fall in Roslyn?
That's a good question. You know what I always use as the magic moment is Remembrance Day. So from Remembrance Day onwards throughout the rest of the year, then I expect snow around here. So it's kind of like my line in the sand to expect snow, Remembrance Day.
I remember it's interesting. I've been thinking as it's September 1st, do resolutions happen now or is it January 1st for yourself? How do you plan these things?
I don't do resolutions. I think that there are a crutch
Mhm.
that holds people back. And by that, I mean, like, if you're setting a resolution and you're thinking it as such, come January 1st, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do next year. Well, I mean, what are you doing for the rest of this year? There's quite a few months still until January 1st. And so I don't consider resolutions as a good way to live your life. I think it holds people back from moving forward. But then when they step into the resolution, they've created this moment in time that they've been quote unquote looking forward to executing against. That sometimes it has too much weight, too much heft attached to it. Like, I'm really going to change my ways 4 months from now. And then it gets built up into this undeliverable moment where it's all a bit overwhelming. My opinion is throw the resolutions out the window. You know what you got to do. Just start chipping away at it at a comfortable pace today.
We talk about big wins, big goals. Do you break it down in your mind or on paper where you say, this is where I want to be? This is what it's going to take. And then you count your micro wins. Because if you set something too high, you might put yourself down and then not achieve it.
Yeah, for me, I like to do projects, long-term projects. And so let's call it podcasting.
Yeah.
I set a 10-year project on that, and I don't know what it'll look like 10 years from now. When I designate a project, we'll call it Project X. When I start thinking about Project X, the days before I initiate Project X, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have zero clarity. I don't understand what I'm about to step into, other than a high level sort of intellectual consideration. But other than that, I don't know which way it's going to go. But on day one, when I initiate Project X, we'll call it, then I get to work. And I don't even know what I'm working against per se, other than I get to work. And funnily enough, I just came out of a live chat podcast over on The Collective, where we're to some degree talking about this. And the topic at hand was diversity of life, or life's diversity. And I think I'm a pretty decent example of a diverse life, or a more three-dimensional life, as I said over there in the conversation. Depending on what you consider a career, I might be in my 7th or 8th career right now. And I kind of listed that off on the podcast. And these are careers that have been going that way, and then a 180 and gone that way, and then a 90-degree gone that way, and then, an 87-degree gone that way. All different directions, non-related careers, completely white belt moments, starting points. And so when I start on day one of that new long-term project, again, I don't have clarity as to what I'm doing, but I have faith in the process that is in front of me. My process, a process that I was taught when I was in the military and in special operations. So I start getting to work in my process, and at about the 1 year mark, as I said to the fellas on the podcast today, at the 1 year mark, I start to get enough clarity that now I can see the way. Prior to that, I can't see the way. All I can see is the process. And so at the point where it becomes clear to me my calibrated trajectory, then I can start refining that. I still don't know what it'll look like 7 years from now or 8 years from now, but I do get a sense after about a year of how I'm going to do this in general terms. But that first year, is really uncomfortable for me.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really, really uncomfortable. And I think that's been the way for any new career that I've started. I step into it. My imposter syndrome flares up to 11 out of 10. I don't believe I should be doing it. I believe everyone else can do it better than I can, but I just get to work in the process and I start chipping away at the problem that I don't understand until about a year in, I kind of understand what I'm up against. And then once I've got a bit of clarity, I can more strategically and tactically execute against the problem so that I'm moving towards the outcome that I've loosely visualized.
I think, what is it? October will be our 1 year since our first podcast.
Yeah, that's right, buddy. And by the way, for anyone who hasn't listened to that first podcast, I'd really encourage you to go do it. Now, my imposter syndrome insists that I don't say that out loud, but my experience over the last year of all of the DMs that I've got and all the messages that I've got, the face to face, kind of patting you on the back / us on the back for that conversation. I find it a whole lot easier to say, please go check out that first podcast that you and I did, because I've been told that there were some real gems in that. So if not for me knowing that it was a real good podcast, I would quietly ignore what you just said, and my imposter syndrome wouldn't allow me to back it verbally. But I think it was a good one, buddy.
How have you been able to deal with imposter syndrome? Because oftentimes that's what holds us back. You can persevere through it. It's not easy, but you're able to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and it was a kind of a question that was asked today on the live chat on the collective, and my answer was this: you got to know your why you're doing a thing, and if your why is good enough, then nothing should stop you, and if your why isn't good enough, then everything's going to stop you. And so that first moment where you're clarifying why you're about to do something, the big why, sit down at a table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper and don't get up from the table until you've written down why, the why of the moment, the why of your existence, the why of what you're about to step into. Why are you going to give it your time? Your time is your most valuable resource. So if you intend to give something 10 years of your life, you better be really clear on the why. Once you're clear on the why, the rest starts getting a whole lot easier, because the next step is how. And the how can be really simple bullet points that will generally get you through that first year. And once you've got your why and how, the last step, as far as I'm concerned, or step 3, is applying a velocity factor to it. You can apply a 1 out of 10 or a 12 out of 10. That's completely up to you. But you got to figure out your why, you got to figure out your how, and then you got to figure out how much arse you're going to kick as you move towards that visualized outcome.
I feel like anything you do, you give it a 12 out of 10. You don't want to do the 1 out of 10.
No. And that's not for everyone, but that's for me, because I know myself well enough now that I know when I'm not doing well and when I'm doing well is solely predicated on whether I feel I'm in the game or not. If I feel like I'm not in the game, I'm not interested in the game. And for me to feel like I'm in the game, it's got to have a certain velocity, minimum 8 out of 10. And so once I've got that velocity going, once I know that it's important, I find it quite easy to dial up the pace of the matter, as it were. So I have the luxury or the privilege of my first career teaching me that as humans, we can achieve anything for the right reason. And so I was just taught that there are boundaries that we're taught to believe are false. And as humans, we're far more resilient and capable than school or society or our next door neighbor will tell us. And it's our job to test that ability. It's our job to go out and adventure and pursue into things that challenge us through that adversity, that we can learn more about ourselves, and then start breaking down the disbelief model of I'm just not able to do things. Go do things and learn that you can do things.
Folks often will find a path, a career, maybe find their why and reach their highest potentials in that career, but that's what they want to be known as and stay at. You're okay with pivoting and going back to becoming a white belt, not
Mhm.
once, not twice, many times over. What has that done for you as a person in terms of self growth?
That's an amazing question. I like it because I'm now used to it, but initially I wasn't used to it.
Mm.
And so when I left JTF2 or Tier 1 Special Operations and I stepped out onto the civilian sidewalk on that new day one, I'd stepped out of a system that knew me well, and I knew me well in the system. I had certain titles and qualifications and a certain amount of respect and and reputation that a person knew who I was. Anyone around me knew who I was, and that's a good thing because then you don't have to explain yourself to the world around you. The world already knows you, and then you can just get on with kicking that ass rather than having to explain yourself to every single person who steps in front of you. At a certain point in my military career, everyone just knew me. But out on the sidewalk on day one of civilian life or as a new veteran, no one knew me. And even worse, not only did they not know me, if I could have, which I couldn't at the time, explain to anyone the top secret life that I'd been living, if I could have explained it to them, they would have rolled their eyes and not believed me. And so it's not that I had the opportunity to step out of my first career into the unknown and just have someone tell me what my next step was. I had to figure that all out by myself. And that was really uncomfortable the first time. But after the second time, the third time, the fourth time, I understood the process. I understood the pattern. Observing and trending something into a pattern that you can understand how you work through life is important as far as I'm concerned. The second or third time that I experienced that tie on a new career white belt, for lack of a better term, I understood my pattern of day one, I'm really freaking uncomfortable in that first year. But after the year ish, then it's time to smash. I'll smash in that first year and feel like I don't belong there. But eventually, I feel like I belong there. And then the next phase, once I feel like I belong there, is I feel like I own it. I dominate it. I'm starting to crush it. And so these are all just words in my head or how I live my life. They don't have to make sense to anyone else. I suppose what I'm describing is a sense of velocity or a sense of confidence or a sense of competency or a sense of feeling like that's where I belong in that moment. Whatever that means to anyone who's listening right now. But it's an important phase that I think everyone should go through when they step into a new thing is expect to be uncomfortable for a while. Expect not to know the rule set. Expect to not know the boundaries that you're operating in until you start bumping up against the edge of the boundaries and finding what the construct is that you're in, until you start kind of botching some of the rules or breaking some of the rules or finding out there's new rules that you weren't aware of, until you've kind of gone through that process of understanding the new Monopoly game in front of you. Well, you're not going to play Monopoly very well. That's okay. Just like Monopoly, you can put your hands up in the air and cry about it, or you can shake your head, smile at yourself, and restart a new Monopoly game immediately, right then and there. After you lost that Monopoly game, set the board up, let's go again. And so in time, everyone learns how to play Monopoly better. In time, everyone learns how to play life better, as long as you're an active participant in the game. And I think that's a real big, important point that not everyone picks up on. In order to get better at the game, you've got to be an active participant in the game. You've got to push your pace. You've got to control your trajectory. You can't just be a victim to life. You can't be a leaf in the wind blowing all around around the neighborhood, not knowing where you're going to land and not feeling like you're in charge of where you're going to land. That sense of life is out of control is not a great place to be in when life is completely in your control as soon as you start thinking about the game differently.
How have you designed your life? So, children, by the way, congrats to your son.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
Must be quiet at home right now.
And it's it's kind of funny. So for anyone who hasn't, thank Zach is just talking about our youngest son Keegan. He just graduated out of high school, and like both boys, they graduated double dogwood, which means English and French diploma, and they both graduated with honors. I'm sure they get the smarts from my wife because she's the smartest one in the house. And so Keegan is entering into rural pre-medicine, which is a 3-year program. And after that, he will be entering into whatever he wants, into doctor or whatever, a number of other medical careers that he can step into. He could be in school for 5, 6, 7 years. Who knows? He could be in school for 3 years. It doesn't matter. But what does matter to our family is that he's seeking his fullest potential. He's pursuing the life with the skills that he's been naturally gifted with and that have been created within him, living in our family. The expectation in our household is not to underperform. The expectation is to meet your performance abilities. That's why our oldest is in second year engineering, and Keegan is off to be maybe a doctor. We'll see. But there's no slack and idle hallway passes in our house. It's not that we're not a house full of tiger moms where we're just pushing the pace so hard, irrespective of the kids' feelings. But they're also, to that point, we don't lay back and wrap anyone in a bubble or a warm blanket and keep giving the warm milk and honey every night. There's expectations in the house for each individual to see their full potential or as best as they can.
Did you grow up that way?
No, not at all. Far
Okay.
from it.
So where did that come from? Because if you hadn't grown up that way, was there a mentor in your life? Was there a show you watched where you got inspired and said, that's the kind of leadership that resonates with me?
Well, I could give some maybe minor or brief examples through my high school years, but if I'm being honest, it was far and few between. There was no real strong figures in my life. There's absolutely no strong leaders in my life that were constant in as a kid. And so, truthfully, the first time that I started understanding human potential and leadership and how superhuman humans can be, it was the military. When I joined the military in 1982, at that point I weighed 135 pounds, so I was a skinny kid, and now I weigh 162. And at the peak of my military career for weight-wise, when I was in special operations, I think my heaviest was 175. And by heavy, I mean like there wasn't a shred of fat on me. That was all muscle and bone and brain. And typically, I moved around at my best. I kind of hung out at around 160-ish and a bit. That's when I was really agile. And if I just looked at something, I was already through it or on it or past it or whatever. My physical abilities at their maximum level was around the 160. But when I joined, I was 135 pounds. So I was a skinny kid. And I was also an underperforming kid in the sense of education. Because through high school, I'd been told, like all through school, let me correct that. I'd been told that, not like constantly, but I was led to believe that I was dumb. And that's because sometimes tests I didn't do well on, or some of the reading material I wasn't interested in. But mostly, I just was bored by school. Teachers freaking bored me. Sorry, all the teachers out there. But in the 80s and late 70s, Maybe it's different now where teachers are way more fascinating and excited and happy to be there and really encourage kids to learn and try to understand each kid in front of them in a unique way based on how they particularly learn. Well, maybe that's a new skill, but that wasn't the skill back in the 70s. And that's why I was freaking bored with school. I skipped classes. I'd go hunting and fishing instead of going to classes because the classes were mind-numbingly boring to me. I'd rather stare out a window than listen to someone drone on about something that they're not interested in. How am I supposed to get interested if they can barely stay awake themselves? And so school for me was not a full disaster, but I barely squeaked through graduating high school. And in fact, my math score was atrocious. But as it turns out, like, I'm not a dumb guy. I was just told I was dumb. I just thought I was dumb. But the military, as it turns out, doesn't care if you're smart or dumb. There's a process, and you go through the process. And through that process, you learn more about the system, but you learn more about yourself. And as I proceeded through basic training, I started looking around me and thinking, well, of course, you guys know this, right? Well, of course, you understand that this happens, right? Well, of course, you can see that in 12 minutes from now, the next thing that's going to happen is, but no one was seeing that. But I was seeing that, I was understanding that. And so once I started kind of contextualizing myself in basic training and seeing that, oh, I do learn fast. Oh, I can memorize things. Oh, I can speak to that person about that thing, and they respect my opinion. This process that was put in front of me called basic training for 6 months, I learned a lot about myself that I didn't know. By the end of basic training, it's not that I was confident that I was going to be a mega soldier. I just had more confidence that I wasn't that dumb. And by the way, I was less skinny. And so basic training was good for me. It taught me how to move through life a little easier. Now, that was the beginning. But for my 13 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, as I proceeded forward in that career path, I was given more and more responsibility. I was facing more and more adversity. I was learning some skills that were not typical of the Canadian Armed Forces. And as I moved up the chain of command and up towards the tip of the spear, for lack of a better term, I started to realize that I am definitely not skinny anymore, and I am definitely not dumb. What can I do with this? So the things that I do now are all predicated on my first career, where I was taught by the time I left JTF2 that name the tallest mountain in the world. I'll climb it twice in one day. No one's ever done that. I'll do it because I would believe that, because that's what I was taught to believe. Believe in myself and believe that nothing is impossible. So Everest twice in one day, as a younger man, for sure I would have taken that on, without a doubt.
I'm just thinking we live in a time today, especially with Gen Z and millennials and whomever, where if they're not getting paid an X amount, or if they're not being rewarded in some way or another, they won't action on certain things or go above or beyond what's needed. So it's past 5. I'm done work for the day. Sorry, I don't get paid at 5:01. What made you do the things you did and continue to do in different career paths at that level?
That's a great
It's
question.
remarkable. Yeah.
It comes down to the why. And so what you just illustrated is an important delineation between someone who's in the game for the right reasons and someone who's in the game for the wrong reasons. Now, let me clear that up with a little bit more granularity.
Mhm.
So if someone is a clock puncher, so they go into work at 9, punch that clock. They leave work at whatever, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, punch that clock. And they're punching the clock every single day, 5 days a week for the rest of their life. And if that's all that's expected of them, if all they're serving is the corporation, okay, cool, whatever. But if you're serving humanity, or you're serving people, or you're working on the behalf of other humans rather than a corporation, that's a whole different thing in my world. And I know that that might put some people off. They might think that I'm throwing corporations under the bus. I guess I just did. I don't know. But to me, there's a wild difference between a corporation, which is an institution, I suppose, and an institution called serving your country or serving your fellow man. And so when you're serving your country or serving your fellow man, there is no freaking clock to punch. There is no 9 and there is no 4. There's none of that. There's only serve. Serve when it's needed. Serve when it's inconvenient. Serve because it's the right thing to do. Now, I'll give you a good little case study. I'll not say any names or any institutional titles. All I will say is this. I was approached by an organization that asked me to do some things on behalf of ... And I said, right, let's do that. And the response was, yeah, we can do that next week. No, now in 10 minutes. I'm available now. Well, the individual who wants to be in on that conversation, they can't be here until Tuesday at this specific timeline. I said, forget about it. Not in the game. You're punching the clock. You don't want to serve. You want to work. And you want to work on your time. And your time is a corporate time, not a serve mankind time. If you really want to serve, you ain't looking at your watch. You're looking at when can we do this in the next 10 minutes. And so it's an important distinction. I feel that if you're serving someone, you shouldn't be on the clock. You should just be on the now. And how can we do this now? Not when it's convenient for me. You know what I'm saying?
I do. How do you know when to protect how much you're serving? And of course, I'm not talking about the military career you had. I'm talking about today's time, life, podcasting, being on the interwebs. Everyone has a question for you, Shaun. Hey, what do you think I should do here? What do you think I should do here? Look at this. Check this out. How do you not overwhelm yourself with the interwebs?
Well, I'm still trying to figure it out, buddy. You know, I'm still trying to scale it. I'm still trying to find efficiencies within the effectiveness of the delivery. And so, with the collective podcast as the example, that was an attempt to efficiently address some of the questions that I was getting on the regular every single day that were repetitive, and try to get a podcast out there that explained to the individual in one setting for everyone. Just go refer to last Tuesday, or go listen to episode 131, or whatever the case is. But as it turns out, it's not been that effective. It hasn't been that efficient to say, hey, go refer to the podcast, because people just want to exist in the now with their needs now. And so they're not going to listen to 131 podcast. They want their question answered now. Hi, Shaun. I appreciate that you answered that yesterday, but could you please answer it again today? And it's a struggle because I don't have the time to re-answer. But at the same time, I'm trying to make myself available, approachable, trying to be helpful. So right now I'm in a phase of I'm trying to scale it up so that my time is more efficiently and effectively used, but I'm not there yet. So I'm still facing a lot of these repetitive questions that just seem to come in all the time. And it's mostly from people who are just getting to know me, you know, within a week or two or whatever, and they've got all the questions and they want all the answers. But they're the same person that was, there 5 weeks ago, who was doing the exact same thing, or 4 weeks ago that was doing the exact same thing. So, you know, obviously I see the pattern now and I'm trying to scale out of it. But at the same time, it's tough because I want to make myself available, you know.
We can't be everywhere. And
Can't be
especially
everywhere. But at the same time, I'm not just representing myself. And so I'm representing the collective to some degree. I don't know what I'm representing anymore, but I'm representing something more than just Shaun, just myself. And so I feel the responsibility or the weight of that moment. And so I do my best to try to help the person in the moment. And I find myself repeating the same answers quite frequently.
your why today, has it changed over the years, over the career pivots? Has that changed as well? Your overall why, or has that stayed the same?
It has changed to some degree, but every time I start a new white belt, a career or a path, whatever the case is, I like to understand my why. I don't need to talk
Yeah.
to anyone about it. I don't explain it to my wife or my kids or my neighbor, whatever. It only has to make sense to Shaun. I don't need to externally converse with anyone over that. I only need to internally converse with myself, because I find for me that I get better clarity in the quiet of my mind as I chew on these kind of new initiatives, for lack of a better term. If I'm clear in my own words, in my own mind, without external validation, we'll call it, then I know that I'll be okay. I know it'll be a rough ride for the
Mhm.
first year, but I know I'll be okay if Shaun is okay with Shaun doing this thing. So the reasons that I do various things, the various whys, we'll call it, are different in each circumstance. However, there is an overarching theme, a commonality thread that goes right back to my first career, and that would just be trying to serve, trying to be helpful, trying to help my fellow man. Now, I might not seem like a super helpful guy who's like, he's Mr. Helpful, just go drop a line with Mr.
Yeah.
Smiley Helpful Guy, because I'm probably not that.
Mhm.
But all my life I've been serving. I served in the military. I served at the Ontario Police College. I served at the computer system engineering school that I taught at. I served in my coffee shop. I served in international security. I served when I was writing the book. I served as a high performance race coach. I served as a coffee roaster. I served as a podcast. It's always serving others. This podcasting that we're doing right now, uh, we may have jokingly said this before, but I've recently started saying it to some degree, because people are starting to form a pattern that things are growing, things look a little bit successful from the external sidelines. Yeah, you're probably looking forward to being famous and making money. What, are you kidding me right
Oh
now?
God. Yeah.
It's the last thing I want. And by the way, money, every minute that I stand in front of this microphone, I lose money,
Oh
because
yeah.
I could be using this time to make money, but I'm
Mhm.
not. I'm not only giving away my time, I'm losing money by doing this thing. So it's not a money thing for me. Uh, it, it, Nobody could pay me an amount of money to do this unless I wanted to do it. And for me to want to do it, I've got to feel like I'm serving, which goes back to that common thread.
I hear this a lot. You can't serve until you serve yourself and take care of yourself. Have you ever said to yourself, "Oh, I made the wrong decision of serving this, say, a moment in time?"
Yeah, those are called life lessons.
Yeah.
And it's important that it's a good question. It's an important question because um, life is not like a fairy tale, and my life has not been a fairy tale. And even my personal life has not been a fairy tale, and irrespective of career.
Mhm.
So these kind of things over the years that I've done, there's been times when I've just shaken my head and thought, what the heck is even going on here? Why am I in this right now? Why am I even consider pursuing it any further? This is not a good decision. But as long as I started whatever I was into with the right intention of understanding my why, I know that throughout the process, there'll be road bumps that we'll call them life lessons, where I have to rely back on my why. On day one, it made sense. Why is it not making sense now? And unless there's any
Mm.
radically different mm, data that I'm observing that points clearly to, oh, this is absolutely a poor decision, then I'll just keep pursuing what I started my why with, even if it's feeling a bit off, until I get that data that demonstrates this is definitely off. We need to branch point this.
Are you enjoying your podcasting career thus far?
Well, I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I guess it has been about a year since I started taking podcasting semi seriously. I used to have to call it potties, and I still refer to it as
Mhm.
potties from time to time, because it took me damn near a year to get comfortable with the word podcasting and being a podcaster. I mean, A shiver runs up my spine when I call myself a podcaster. It's the strangest thing to say it out loud. It's the strangest thing to title myself as a podcaster. It is so alien to me. But I got to own it. I got to own the trajectory that I'm on, a self-selected trajectory based on listening to my friends who asked me to come and do this. And so a year since you and I have chatted, I'm more comfortable with being a podcaster, and I am more comfortable with the direction that it's going, which is the more important part. I see the benefits for others now. I've just heard it too many times and seen too many positive outcomes now that it would be hard to turn away from it, if that makes sense.
Yesterday on the collective, you guys talked about circle of trust. And for the listeners, check that episode out. We'll put the link in. But you also posted something. You were smoke jumping with a group of gentlemen out of a plane. What was going on there? And I know you've talked about it on the collective, but if you could share with us exactly what that means to people, that trust. Like, Zach, we just talked about it for an hour. Do we have to do it again?
No, it's a great question. And it's a really important question because it can be something viewed as an entry into a new life trajectory, as it were. And I guess what I would like to do now is maybe speak specifically to veterans, first responders, and law enforcement that are either struggling in their current careers or have just left that career and are kind of lost in their ways, or maybe they're just sitting at home and their friends from back in the day aren't around them anymore. They're not connected to them. They're just kind of lost to some degree, not sure what to make of this thing called life. That's a more common occurrence than I think most people realize. At least it's an observed commonality from my perspective, given that the people that reach out to me or I talk to, nearly all of them are suffering a clear trajectory or sense of purpose or their why. And so stepping into a circle of trust or stepping into a new opportunity or life or job or hobby or group, stepping into something new like that, if you know that you're about to step into it, chances are before you step into it, you're going to consider how to do your best leading up to that moment when you step into the group. And so if, as an example, that image that we're referring to, that was me in a six-way circle with red smoke coming off of my boot when I was part of the Skyhawks parachute demonstration team back in 1989. I was not a permanent staff. I was a 1-year attachment in 89. That meant that I was entering into that team as an unproven asset. And the people that were in that jump with me as we were falling to the earth, most of them were permanent staff. And so it was a privilege to be invited into that six-way smoke jump based on them seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself, based in them trusting me to execute in the moment, whereas I didn't see if I was capable of doing it or not. Them putting their faith in me in that moment encouraged me to step up to the moment. And so before I became part of the Skyhawks, what I'd been doing for the years previous was demonstrating my worth to step into that new group. Once I'd stepped into the new group, then it was my job to earn that spot every single day, not let down the team. And I think a circle of trust for anyone out there who's looking to create a better life for themselves, identify a group that you want to step into. And before you step into it, chances are you probably got a little bit of work to do on yourself. Clear some things up with yourself. Get a little right inside, get a little right outside, so that when you step onto that day one of joining a new group, you feel to some degree that you belong in that circle of trust. Once you've stepped into it, now you're trusting the group to accept you. So before you put that trust in the group, you've got to trust that you feel you've done some things to belong there. Because if you step into a group that is going to be trusting you, and you don't even trust yourself, you don't trust the group, you don't trust anything around you, now you're not an asset. Now you're a problem
Liability.
and a liability, and not just a problem for the team, as it were, but a problem for yourself. And here's why: because we all get that sense of cognitive dissonance. We all know when it's off. We can lie to ourselves all we want. Yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm going to join that team. It's day one. I put 3 minutes of work into myself. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to kick that ass. Where's the biggest ass kicking group that I can join? I've done 12 push-ups. I'm good to go. But the moment that you're heading towards that group, you're just about to reach that door handle to enter into that new group, you know inside. Before you reach that door handle, you know inside that you're not ready for it. You feel that you haven't done the work. You know that you're going to be a liability. That cognitive dissonance is what will ruin a new entry into a new circle of trust. Conversely to that, you don't have to show up feeling like you're the man, like you're better than the group, like you're more qualified than the group that you want to step into. You just have to feel as you reach for that doorknob that you've put in some effort, that you've made an effort to belong in that team, that new endeavor, that new path, that new thing. If you feel like you've done some work to go stand on that start line, once you feel like you kind of belong, then you're good. The circle of trust will take care of the rest, as long as every day, once you step into that group, you earn your seat. And what do I mean by earn your seat? You just got to do the things that are expected of you, but more importantly, the things you expect of yourself to belong there in that group every day. That's how things get built. That's how things get better, by joining something, holding yourself accountable before you join it. And then once you've joined it, holding yourself accountable within the group. As we were all falling through hurtling through the sky as a six-way smoke jump, we're all hanging on to each other, facing everyone in the circle. We're all looking at each other.
Mhm.
The guy across from me in the air, he's looking me directly in the eyes. I'm looking him directly in the eyes. And there's no doubt about what's going on in the moment. Everyone's good at their job. Everyone belongs there, and everyone has responsibilities. But all six of us all staring into the center and looking at each other, giving each other the nods and making sure we're all good to go. That's a circle of trust where everyone knows that the moment is good because we are all doing our part.
Every day we're growing. The younger Shaun Taylor, when you look at these photos, is there something you would have said to him today from the wisdom and the trials and errors of life that you've learned thus far?
Oh, yeah, for sure. What I would have told young Shaun is figure out how to get along with people a little bit better, because I was a handful.
And you're not today, Shaun?
Oh, I'm a
Just kidding.
handful now,
Yeah.
but back then I had an edge, and so I had my ways, and I wasn't for everyone, and so if someone bumped up against me, I'd look at them a certain way, and depending on the look that they gave me would be depending on the outcome of that look, and so I had an edge, and as a young man, that's not a bad thing in the particular career trajectory that I was on in my first career. But when you step out onto the civilian world, you fold your arms and you start looking around, scanning for threats, as it were, and looking at the guy next to you who's mouth breathing and is clueless that the traffic light just turned green. I mean, it's a whole different world. And so that young Shaun who came out of tier one and was observing the world around him was less than impressed. And less than impressed Shaun with an edge is not fun to be around, perhaps. So as a young man, I wish I could have had a little bit more sensitivity to the moment, we'll say.
That's a word I haven't heard you say. When we talk about the leaf, you said you don't want to be a leaf just blowing around everywhere and floating around and not knowing your why or not knowing life and getting to it. What do you want to do? Where do you want to be? Was there a moment you ever felt that?
Well, I do now.
Yeah.
That's a great
Okay.
question. So here's the deal. I said that through the context of someone who's new to the game, as it
Mhm.
were. And so, but now I don't care too much. It doesn't matter to me which direction I'm going because I feel really comfortable, which are up, down, in, out, left, right, all the ways, spinning in circles. Doesn't matter to me. Wherever that leaf goes, I'm pretty comfortable where it goes. Put me on a river, put me in the air as a leaf. Doesn't matter. I'll be all right. I'll be all right because of all the mistakes that I've made over the years and the lessons that I've learned. And to me, it's not a big deal anymore. I don't need to, life doesn't have to be predictable. Whereas at the start of my life, start of my first career, I suppose, it was nice to have some kind of predictability, some kind of structure, some kind of sense of where things are going. And I'm not saying that the military is unstructured, because that wouldn't be true. But my career, though structured, had a lot of the unknown in it. It had a lot of chaos in it, we'll call it, that is not easy to understand on a chalkboard, is not something that you can flip open a binder and go to page 3 and realize that for the next year, the chaos is a full year of chaos. But just refer to step 3, and step 3 will sort you out. There is no step 3. And so I got comfortable with being a leaf in the wind. But it's not like it. I wouldn't go so far as to say no. I'll say this: no one should pursue being a leaf in the wind in their first career and think that it's magically going to teach you a whole pile of wisdom that you can then, for the rest of your life, be good to go. Because that is not the case. That was just my circumstance, and I managed to learn a few things through that 13-year process that then now allows me to feel like a leaf in the wind, and I really don't care because I know I'll be all right, if that makes sense.
And you've also created the foundation around you to know that wherever I blow, I'm still metaphorically in these walls. I'm not going far.
But I don't mind going far. In fact, I don't mind getting blown over the horizon and not even knowing where I am. That's not a big deal to me.
Nice.
As a leaf, I could get blown into the void, into the pitch black, and no big deal. I've been in the pitch black before. The void to me, the unknown to me, the not knowing myself as a leaf and where I'll land, no big deal. I think that I have enough confidence now. I've faced enough adversity. I've accomplished enough minor successes that I feel like whatever life brings to me now is manageable.
Bring it.
Bring it.
Yeah. When you look at your photos back in the day, does it bring back memories of the good times, the bonding, the friendships? There was something that us as civilians don't understand that I've heard from the military that you get from brotherhood and sisterhood.
You know, it's funny. In my live IG chat today, before I went into the live collective podcast, someone had asked me, in fact, a young soldier who's out fighting forest fires here in BC was in my live, and he said, "Hey, Shaun, I got a question for you. What's the most memorable thing that you experienced in your Canadian Armed Forces career?" And I said, "Geez, that's a really good question. No one's really asked me that before." And I said, "I guess if I was being honest, it's not so much about any singular event. It's not about rappelling down something or jumping out of something or shooting something or blowing something up or doing all of these things that the movies focus on. The thing that stands out to me the most, is the most memorable, is the man that I worked with, the man to my left and right, the professionalism, the excellence, the humor, the wherewithal, the no quit, the superhuman aspects of things. The men stand out more than the machine. The men stand out more than the moment. It's about just good human beings that I got to work with and learn more about, and not just learn more about themselves. Not so much learn more about them, but through being around them, I learned more about myself, my shortcomings, and how I could do things better. If and not just in the sense of that guy can jump so high he's almost levitating. Well, I do love that. I do love chasing a little bit of levitation because I got a competitive streak in me. But it's more about observing my flaws or what I needed to improve on in order to meet the standards of the group per se.
Each day you have a routine and you share it with us. It's interesting that I started applying some of that in my life. So reading a book, going outside and sitting outside for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't post it on Instagram, but it has motivated me, inspired me. How has that been for you to see that from others? Whatever you're doing through your actions, it gets passed on to many others.
Yeah, it's nice, man. I mean, like it's nice in the sense of it was never my intention was I was just doing me.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to convince anyone to be me. I'm just doing me, and through my actions, whoever's paying attention, if they want to give it a try and see some success for themselves out of that process or routine or the things that I do, then that's great. Now, why is it great for them? Because I think that these kind of positive actions or routines or habits, we'll call them, um, is great for that person. But I also get a certain sense of not satisfaction, but the reminder that the path that I'm on, which is trying to serve, is good. I if I'm explaining the kind of protein that I take on at the end of the night, if someone asks me a question about that and they then engage in that process to make their life a little bit better based on some minor wisdom, then I'm comfortable with that. It encourages me to continue doing it, realizing that there's value in it for others, not for me. I mean, I'm going to do me anyway. And I think that's one of the important aspects of what I do on social media is it's just not, I'm not a contrived person. If you see me riding my bike later today, which you will, or you see me riding my bike yesterday, which you did, these are things that are just me doing me. I'm not looking for opportunities to create social media content. In,
No, I can
in
see that.
fact, quite the opposite.
Mhm.
One of my struggles right now is I'm in the phase now at about this year mark where I'm starting to see not advantages, but positive outcomes for others. And as is my way, I want to do more. I want to pick up the pace. I want to encourage more. I want to grow more. I want them to be more. And so I'm trying to rein myself back from producing more social media content that I could easily do that I'm almost like desperate to do because I I have a sense that it might just encourage one more person to not kill themselves. It might encourage one more person to be nicer to their neighbor or whatever the case is. That thought that someone out there who's listening or seeing or thinking about anything that I do or my friends do within a collective, that makes me want to give more. And right now I'm just trying to hold back so that I don't come across as some goof who's just like churning out the content just to get all the spotlights, you know?
The rosin influencer.
Yeah.
When you look at the collective as a whole, the folks that are on there, law enforcement, first responders, veterans, have you seen a level of interaction that you're pleased with? And how come we in Canada are not seeing, to be honest, the likes, the views, the interactions that I see in the States from some of these other folks? So yeah.
No, it's a puzzle to me. And so your question is relevant to
Mhm.
today because on today's podcast over on the collective, we had two new guests who I've never seen before. I'm still not even sure precisely what they do to some degree. They're both Americans, and both of them were on the show for the reason that their friends who have been on the collective as panel guests were so stoked about the collective that they encouraged their friends to come on the collective today. And one of the individuals described it as such: man, I knew nothing about you guys before I jumped into this podcast. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but all I knew was this: my friend told me that it's the best podcast he's ever been on, and it was so different than other podcasts. The way that you guys run things professionally, and the course of the conversation, and rather than it being about patting each other on the back, it's about moving the conversation around for others so that we gain some wisdom out of this moment. Both of the guests were extremely encouraging and very much fans of the show today. And so our guests, and we've had now over 200 guests from around the world across a variety of different industries, from the special forces all the way through to human behavioral scientists and doctors, and oh geez, we've just had it all. What haven't we had? I don't know. Professional frisbee golf player. I don't know. We've had a lot of things, and I suppose if we wanted a professional frisbee thrower by the end of the weekend, we could probably have one on.
Oh, yeah.
And so the number of guests and the quality of guests and the diversity of guests that we've had on, I think, is solely dependent on our last good show, our last good performance, our last good effort. Every day I try to crack it out of the park. Whether we do or not, I don't know. But every day I try, because I think about who I'm serving, which is the demographic that is paying attention. Who am I serving? It's the guests that are on the panel that day, and how to encourage them to drop the wisdom bombs, and how can I learn in the moment. And it's for the future. And so if we did a poor job today on the Collectives podcast, why on earth would anyone tune in tomorrow?
Exactly.
Or whatever the case is. But it's not that it's frustrating or disappointing. It's challenging to understand why the podcast isn't gaining the traction that it deserves, based on the level of content that is on there, based on what we're hearing from all the guests, which is, you guys are the best in the business right now. I mean, I'm not saying it, they're saying it, and we hear it nearly every freaking day. And
shout out to the collective.
Yeah. To the collective, yeah. And shout out to the collective. So more correctly, shout out to the guests. And hopefully it'll change, not for me, because I suppose the more eyes that I know are on every episode, the more pressure or stress that I feel that I'm carrying on my shoulders. But I do wish that more people were tuning into it, simply because some of the stuff that the guests have to say on a variety of different subjects are game changing. They're life changing, you know?
Yeah. And the more views just mean impact. That's what it is. That's the way I look at it. It's not just looking at us or whatnot. It's how far are you going? The reach. You know, and if we can change one person, that's all it takes.
Well, statistically, men in Canada live to about 78, 79 years. So I've got just under 20 years to get this thing organized, so that at least one more person will watch the collective.
Do you think about that a lot, though? How much time you have in life?
Oh, I do. For sure. For sure. Yeah, I'm very aware of my mortality. It's not that we laugh about it in our house a fair bit, but it's a common conversation. And I have zero hesitation on saying, no matter what the family's plans are, yeah, I got about another 20 years, so let's get it going. And mortality is nothing that we stick our head in the sand in respect to. Even the simplest of things. Case study, or case in point, my oldest son Evan gave himself a haircut just the other day, and so he came down and said, "Hey, Dad, could you do the back of my neck?" And as I was cleaning it up, I said, "Looking pretty good, kid. You gave yourself a good haircut." And he said, and he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, you probably only got a couple more haircuts left, because I'm thinning out on top." Yeah. Well, not bad for a 60-year-old, I'll say. But eventually, like I see it happening, one day I'm not going to have any hair. And there's no point in hiding from that. There's no point pretending that I'm freaking going bald. I had a good run. but it's going to happen. And I've had a pretty good run in life, but at 78, 79, it's going to happen. So all of the duck dodge diving in respect to we all die, I don't do that duck dodge dive. I'm very aware of how much time I've got left on the planet to some degree, and I'm trying to do the most I can with it for myself, for my family, and for the people who are around me, the larger team that I'm serving.
When you look at your physical body, I'm sure you can't do the things you did when you were 20, 25, 30. Is that hard on your mind at times where you can't reach those potentials? Or have you now said, okay, I'm okay to dial it down. I've already done it.
It's a great question. And it's a bummer to know that I used to be superhuman. But now I'm just maybe superhuman for my age, which pales in comparison to true superhumanism. But I do all right for my age, I think. And I take satisfaction that I'm peak performing today, just as I was yesterday. And my peak performance now doesn't look like my peak performance when I was 30. Because when I was 30, I was invincible. I could levitate. I had a Romulan cloaking device. I was magical, but now I'm not. But the things that I do at 60 are peak for a 60-year-old. Now, maybe there's some 60-year-olds that can smash my performance in life. Maybe they're right here in my town. That's awesome. But for me, contextualizing Shaun against Shaun, I think that I'm doing pretty good for my age. So I'm not too hard on myself on I can't jump over buildings in a single leap. I've maybe got to take an elevator. But by the time I get up to the top of the building in the elevator, I can look around, think, yeah, I did that.
And you have. Yeah. Where does the confidence come from? Is it through trial and error and you're competent? And what that's done is build trust. So there's certain things that somebody needs or is questioning in life. You're the guy, you're the man.
Do
Do you?
I for sure I do have it, but it ebbs and flows. I try to shape it. I try to use it as a tool in the time in the moment. And so, if you've got zero ego, how do you even get anything done? You need a tiny bit of ego to get things done. You need a lot of ego to do massive things. But how massive should your ego be to do massive things? Massive enough to get it done, but no more massive than it needs to be. And so each moment has its fluidity of ego requirements, we'll call it. But I think throughout my entire life, I've struggled to find the right balance in all kinds of moments because I am a confident guy. But I'm confident because I was created to be confident. When I joined the military, skinny, underperforming kid, unconfident. When I left the military, less skinny, way more confident, and ready to kick life in the teeth because that's what I was taught. That's what I became. I became a confident, capable man in anything.
Mhm.
And by anything, I mean, I can't fly a plane right now. But if you tell me by the end of the year, I've got to be flying a plane because my family's life depends on it, guess what?
You don't do it.
You better salute me when you get on my plane because we'll be flying somewhere. And that's just the way I look at life.
Mm.
The tasks in front of me are provided to me either by myself or by people around me. And once the task is in front of me, I confidently go on with kicking it in the teeth. Now, does that mean I'm going to smash it out of the park on day one? No, I've already stated for the first year, I'll be a bit of a hot mess, a bit of a disaster. I won't believe in myself. I won't trust in myself. I blah, 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 all those things. I'll have the confidence, though, of knowing that this is who I am and this is how I work and this is the way it works for me. I've just got to move through the uncomfortable moment. Once I start seeing a bit of clarity, then I can get on with smashing with clarity.
Taking it back here for a second, Shaun, there was folks that come out of the military, law enforcement, and don't know what to do. They actually have no confidence because their confidence was once in the career that they were in, similar friends, similar ideologies, vision. Now you get out in the real world, and I mean, we know there's characters of all kinds. How did you find your way? How did you pave your path, especially not in career wise, just life? adapting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess maybe the best way to explain how I approach that is I'll use the example of I'd left the Ontario Police College as a use of force instructor, which was my second career, and then I was wandering down the streets of Ottawa. And as I was wandering down the street thinking, what am I going to do next? You know, I think I might have mentioned to you that I saw a group of people standing out in front of the building, wondered what that was all about, wandered over there to kind of see what's going on. Didn't know why I wanted to do that. Walked in, took the elevator, bang, bang, bang. I'm up on the third floor talking to someone. Hey, what's this all about? Oh, it's a computer system engineering school. Okay. That's how that adventure started. I simply you can call it listen to the universe. You can call it listen to your intuition. You can call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it your calling if you wish. But I was across the street, walking along, minding my own business. And when I looked off to my right and saw that crowd, I felt pulled towards it. Not like a tractor beam, not like some sort of magical thing. I just felt a feeling and I executed on that. And as I got closer to it and thought, all along the way, it was a lot of huhs until I was writing an entrance exam to get into the school. And I was thinking, And then I was in the school and then I was thinking, And then I was teaching in the school and I was thinking, Then I was head instructor and I was thinking, Then I was writing a book and I was thinking, And so this was not a trajectory that I was thinking about when I was 12 years old. It was not a trajectory that I was thinking about when I was in my black ninja outfit scaling down a skyscraper in the pitch black. Computer system engineering was so foreign to me, as foreign as podcasting, that I never saw that in my career path or my future, my life. But once I engaged in it, I wanted to fully engage in it. I wanted to explore what this trajectory was. I wanted to understand what I was capable of in the moment. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to face the adversity. I wanted to learn, be more, as it were. The good thing about using that as the example is I started off with the unknown and challenging myself out into the adventure of it. But then along the way, I realized, okay, now I can serve others. And that's when I started teaching.
Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or any of these folks, what did they do for you, first of all, Spartacus? And why are you not a fan of folks posting that stuff out there, and not doing something about it in their own life? Because they can read it, they'll say it out loud and feel better about themselves, which is great. You want people to feel good, but you also want people to action on things, because feeling good is just, well, we know it's one element. It's in your mind. It's not reality.
Yeah, when I read things, when I read quotes, when I read Seneca or Marcus Aurelius or whoever, modern philosophers, by the way, as well, it's uncommon that I see something and think, wow, I've never thought of that before. What I usually think of, that's an interesting way of saying what I already know. And so I think that's a difference between not living a full life and reliant upon others who have to gain your wisdom versus going out and living a full life, gaining your own wisdom, and then comparing it against other wisdoms, which is precisely what I try to do over on the collective. I try to every day go to the collective podcast and enter into it, expecting to write a book in the moment, in that hour. It's a living book, except it's a conversation. And I'm not trying to write a book verbally that then becomes a book. I'm trying to enter into a conversation that is book worthy. And to be book worthy, or more correctly, quote worthy, wisdom quote worthy, that requires a certain style of communication with a certain type of person or people. And the people that in that hour that are dropping the Seneca quality quotes, not quoting Seneca, but as good as anything that Seneca ever said or better, The reason that's happening is because the people who are in that seat at that moment earned their seat long before they sat in the seat. And then while they're in their seat, they're simply reflecting the quality life that taught them these wisdoms. They don't need to be validated by Seneca. They're validating Seneca. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. Yeah. Because they've also lived life. They're doing things. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. It's flipping it. Yeah.
It's flipping it. And
Mm.
one of the traps of living your life in a dusty book, there's there's influencers out there, for lack of a better term, that
I
are
don't know
19
any. I
years
have no
old.
idea.
They're 19 years old, and they can't tie their own shoes. They would misspell wisdom, and they're preaching like they're the preacher man. And it's discouraging. In fact, it's infuriating to me, because they are a distraction from the people out there who've lived much fuller lives and can string a sentence together with some wisdom in it. And so that less wise crowd, that less full life crowd, we'll call it, they're solely reliant in most cases on all the dusty quotes, all of the dusty readings. As a PhD in philosophy, we'll call it, they can talk the talk, but they've never freaking walked the walk. And so it's fun to be around people who've got all the quotes but no dust on their shoes. I I enjoy those because it makes me realize that they are a radically different person than the kind of people that I've learned the most from, which are not PhDs in philosophy. They're people who've got a lot of dust on their boots and may not be well spoken or well educated, but they're much wiser than that PhD.
You said growing up as a kid, you were not interested in school, the teachers, and all of that. Now you love reading. Is it because it's on what you want? And I think so many kids have gone through that in life where we are forced to learn something that it's not relating to us. And now the books that you choose excite you and take you through some journeys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, but I gotta correct you a tiny bit, because as a kid, I loved reading. I was a voracious reader,
Oh.
just like our own boys are voracious readers. My genre of the time was science fiction. So Heinlein and etc., all of the classic science fiction writers of the time. The librarian saw me more than anyone in that high school. I'm sure of it. Actually, it was my best friend's mom. She was the librarian. And so she'd be used to me spending time in the library on the regular during school and after school. And so I read a lot, just like our own boys read a lot. And I still read a lot now. But my kind of reading is things, as you said, things that interest me, things that fascinate me, either because I don't know enough about it or because I understand the subject reasonably deeply, but now I'm stringing patterns together, as it were. And so I think probably the most nerdy I ever got in respect to my reading and patternizing a lot of information, of course, would have been when I was a high performance race coach. That had there's a lot of subject material that you can dive into if you really want to be the best coach in the world, which, by the way, every coach should want to be. And so I poured myself into a lot of even non-related subject material to see if I could tie that somehow into serving my athletes better.
The coaches that are out there today, we see a lot of them on social media, considered life coaches.
Mm-hmm. Most of them need their own life coach to life coach.
It's
They
true
could
though, and
they
I'm
could
laughing.
really they
Yeah.
could really do about a year of life coaching with someone who isn't a life coach in order to better understand why they're not a life coach and should be something else. Because again, at 19, 20, 21, you can't be a life coach. You can't spell it. And further to that point, you can be a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old claiming to be a life coach, and maybe you're the person who needs the life coach most of all. And that's a little bit of a distraction as far as I'm concerned, and a bit concerning within the veteran community, as it were. When flags are being waved around, I'm a life coach. Come on over here. I've got some tips for you. I got some wisdom for you, and just follow my way because my way is the right way. Meanwhile, they're so deep in their own struggle that they can't see what's going on around them. They can't see how ineffective they are as a life coach and how desperately they should have a life coach.
It's a scary time when you see all these coaches and considering themselves life coaches. I don't even think anyone is a life coach because aren't we all learning? Aren't we all constantly adjusting? I don't think I'll ever hear you say you're a life coach. You're just doing you, and the people that are interested will engage and learn from
Yeah,
you.
I'm trying to help,
Mhm.
and I'm but I'm the difference being that I'm trying to help with a body of knowledge behind me that is multifactorial, as it were. And so the the other important piece to that is to help someone, you need to be more than one dimensional. Further to that, you need to have a sense of what you're actually responsible for. And if you were a private in the military, a young private, even if you were a recruit in the military, you finished basic training and then you left the military for whatever reason.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that you're now a life coach. And so the being a veteran does not confer upon you any magical skill sets if you're only in the military for 3 years. Nor does it confer on you any special forces wisdom if you were never in the special forces. And so what I've seen out there is some life coaches that were loosely connected to the military in some regard, or were in the military and had a standard issue career, and they conflate it into, I've worked with special forces, I've created amazing teams, I've done this, that, and the other thing. Meanwhile, they only know their neighbor who used to be in special forces, who rarely talks to them. And so the conflation of associations, or the conflation on the amount of wisdom or experience that someone has in order to become quote unquote a life coach, I find to be almost a race to the finish line on mistruths. And so everyone is trying to out mistruth each other in order to stay ahead of the pack of life coaching, to a point where it becomes someone is representing themselves as something they completely are not. And as they're doing that, they've lost the sense of who they're responsible to. They've lost their way because they're being responsible to their bank account or chasing the business success. Whereas it's quite the opposite. You've only got one responsibility as a coach, and that's to the people that you're serving. And if you're serving athletes, or if you're serving a person who's come to you for guidance and is paying you for that guidance, or more correctly, maybe isn't even paying you for guidance, that moment is not just you chirping about something that you're just going to chirp about and not consider the gravity of the moment, which is your advice at that point is being listened to by another human being who's come to you for solutions. They may incorporate those solutions into their life. And if you haven't fully thought that moment out and the gravity of the responsibility that you have, well, holy moly, it's time to start thinking about it, because you've got another person's life in your hands. That's easy to understand as a senior NCO or as a senior non-commissioned officer in the military. You're taught that. You're taught that your first point of contact is your troops, and that you are responsible for their care, control, safety, execution of the tasks at hand, and all of that good stuff. Things that you learn later in your military career that become tangible executionable items or actionable items within a life coaching process. These things show up later in the military career. They don't show up at the start of the career. And so I I've seen people out there representing themselves as something they're not. I've also seen people representing themselves as something they're not, and then blindly coaching people that they aren't fully understanding the gravity of the moment and how they are disservicing someone.
And oftentimes it can be fatal.
It can be fatal. And and then what's the ripple-on effect? So before it becomes fatal, the ripple-on effect is everyone who's standing around that person, who's observing them in the bad process, the disservice process. They're now thinking that maybe that's the way things are done within their own little circle of friends who are looking for ways to do it better. So, and then if it is a fatal situation, what's the ripple-on effect beyond that? Not to speak of the family or immediate circle, as it were. But the message is now what? Life coaching doesn't work, or don't listen to other people because ... I mean, it's fraught with danger. It's fraught with problems if the person who's delivering the quote unquote life coaching has never considered the gravity of the situation.
You're not being true to yourself. And there have been moments in my life where you put on a mask and it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
Once I realized, you know what, I'm done with this. The facade of being somebody I'm not and all these things. You as a person become happier. You become peaceful. And
Yeah.
and you can start from rock bottom and clean slate it. Fix it all up. Layers.
Yeah, and by the way, like get right back to your baseline of not feeling like a goof, not
Yeah.
feeling like you're lying to yourself, not feeling the cognitive dissonance. We you might have heard me talk about this in live podcasts before. Maybe you and I have talked about it personally in the past, but I think that as humans, we know what's right. We know what's right for us. We know what
Yeah.
the right move is. We know what's right around us. We know what's right. And whether it's unconscious, subconscious, conscious, whether it's the reptilian brain, whether it's the prefrontal, doesn't matter. None of these things matter. What does matter is you feel it. And it's unarguable. You feel what you feel, and you feel when you're doing wrong. When you're doing wrong, if you keep doing wrong, that cognitive dissonance is erosive. It corrodes away your sense of self. It corrodes your confidence. It corrodes your clarity. It corrodes all kinds of things. And so it's really, really, really hard to drop the mask. But the moment that you do,
You're
things
free.
get a whole lot better.
Oh yeah.
A whole lot better. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not a Disneyland 3-ticket ride moment where the world is perfect forever from that point onward. What it does do is it allows you to get rid of the cognitive dissonance, the white noise that's been blasting in your brain all those years of realizing that just got to keep lying to myself, everything will be okay. But it never will be. The white static never goes away on that cognitive dissonance. But the moment that you drop the mask, you can get silence. It's time to get to work for sure. It's time to start improving for sure. But improving in the silence of your mind with some help from friends, getting your trajectory cleared up, that's a good thing.
Today I was looking online on Instagram and somebody's got these ebooks and all these things, journals. I love creating things. I said maybe I could just put one together and just say, hey, download it for free, have fun, just as a thing for Mentel. And then I stopped myself and I said, well, who the hell am I to write like categories for a journal for people? I'm not qualified for that stuff. And then there's that imposter syndrome. Well, you're not a therapist, you're not a psychologist. What are you going to talk about? You still haven't even filled out your own journal, Zach. And I haven't. And I have this journal my mom gave me before she passed, and it says, where will you be in 5 years? And it gives you these things. And I can never figure it out and fill it out because I'm afraid.
Well, first of all, I'll say this, that the titles that you tossed out, like therapist or psychiatrist or these things, as far as I'm concerned, boring,
I'm with you.
whatever.
I am
You know
with
what I
you.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had a buck for every time someone said to me, dude, I've gone to a therapist for the last 10 years, and what you just told me just changed my entire life. How come they couldn't do that? And so I don't think the wisdom is trapped in a PhD. The wisdom is in all of us, as long as we can figure out how to communicate it to the person in front of us in a way that is meaningful for them, a way that gets traction, a way that makes them wake up and recalibrate their ways. And so, who are you to write a journal? Well, you're the right guy if you write the right journal, you know? And it doesn't mean that you have to finish your own journal from your mom before you can think about writing a journal. You're almost a perfect candidate to write a journal, because right now the journal that you've got isn't working for you.
Sure.
Write a journal that works for you. Now it's going to work for at least one other human on the planet, unless you're the super freak of only one Zach in the world who's totally different from everyone, which is not the case, because there's enough commonality in the human condition that something that you would write as a journal would resonate with someone in your freaking neighborhood, never mind within your city.
It goes a long way. And we've seen with the collective by not charging to listen to the collective. I mean, I wouldn't mind paying for the collective compared to so many other streaming shows that we watch, but you know what I mean? One day we'll get there.
I agree. And it's, I mean, money is energy, and transferring energy back and forth between people is a recognition that there's a fair transfer of energy. If I pass wisdom on to someone and they pass me money, well, that's energy transfer. But the trick is knowing your worth or knowing your value. And right now, I feel that I don't deserve anything from anyone. I'm just trying to put value out there. In the future, you know, who knows? Maybe I'll be dead. I've only got, like I said, another 18 or 19 years. Maybe in the future, something will get monetized in respect to the collective. It would be great if somehow it got money, because then it would allow us to pay some bills.
Of course. Yes. Especially because you have a new podcast set up. By the way, it sounds so much better. Shaun.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is so clear. And
Yeah.
have you moved your camera back a bit? Because the
setup, well, as is my way, I'm uncomfortable with the status quo. So every once in a while, I need to flippity doodah things around and test my boundaries and experiment and see, do I like this lighting? Do I like that camera location? Do I like the mic here? The game within the game is what I like to play.
Are you still watching yourself after a podcast?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think if I recall correctly, I'm at about 490 live chats plus the other podcasts that I've done this year. I'm at least 500 podcasts in since January 1st. And that means I'm at about 1,000 reviews of those podcasts to date.
Are you hard on yourself when you review yourself?
Always.
I've said that. I wish I didn't look that way.
But I don't beat myself up in the sense of, geez, you know, if only I wouldn't have. I just knowed it. I'm like, could have done that better. I got to clean that up. I got to stop saying ... And it's not like when I evaluate myself, we'll call it, I am looking for ways to improve, not for me, to deliver the message out to the collective so that people are more comfortable absorbing it, as it were. And so I'm looking for, like, if I'm doing this, or I'm moving my hands, or I'm doing this kind of stuff, like, that's still me doing me. I didn't attend some goofy podcasting 101 course where I paid $100 to understand how to move my hands. My hands are just doing what they're doing now because I'm more comfortable. Because I'm 1,000 into this. And so the me of now versus the January 1st me, way, way different.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, I've got some mat hours on my belt now on the podcasting game. In fact, I would say that in context of some of the podcasters who are out there that have been in it for a few years, I've done more podcasts than they have, which matters, man. It's all time. Time on the saddle, time on the mats, time in the mission, time on the microphone. Time makes you better as long as you are observing yourself after the fact and trying to get better, which, to your point, was, am I hard on myself? I'm as hard on myself as I need to be better the next day.
When you get new technology, so you got the Shure mic and all the setup now, where you're like, now how am I going to set this up? It seems a little too hard. And oftentimes when that happens, people dial back.
Oh no, I am a relentless pursuer of excellence, which means I'm a relentless pursuer of knowledge, which means I'm a relentless pursuer of pushing the pace. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's what I was taught. That's what I like doing. And it's important to not only be taught how to do things like this, it's important for it to be you. Like you cannot be in tier 1 special operations and not want to be there. You can't be a good podcaster and not want to be there every single day. There was days when for sure every single day I didn't want to be in front of this microphone. That was called my first year of sucking, stinking up the place, hating the idea of exposing myself to the internet, hating the idea of letting people into my mind. Because
And
that's what
that's
I
the
do.
biggest one, isn't it?
It's the biggest one, man. Because I'd managed to, for 58 years, keep everyone out of my freaking head. I don't want people to know my inner thoughts. I don't want people to know what wisdom I do or don't have. I don't need people to know any of that stuff. Why am I doing it? The why of things. Well, I'm doing it to explain that if I can do it, others can do it. I'm doing it because it's a challenge to me, and therefore I've accepted the challenge and I will smash. Every day I let people in a little bit more to what I'm thinking. On rides, I'll let people know what I'm thinking as I'm riding. I was on a ride and I put the video up a couple of weeks ago. And as I was talking, the thought was in my head, and I actually talked about it in the video, but I chopped that chunk out because the section of the ride was kind of boring. It was boring terrain. I just didn't see the appeal to anyone to hear my inner thoughts, plus a really boring trail. So I chopped that section out. But what I was saying was, man, like a year ago, I just used to freaking ride my bike, drink coffee, smash, and keep freaking everyone out of my head. No one got to hear or see or know, or I mean, no one.
No, and everything that you're doing today is you've already been doing this. So that's why when we talked about it earlier, this is not for content. This is not social media content. This is your journey. This you documenting it for us.
Yeah, I'm trying to serve.
Yeah.
Is literally what I'm trying to do, and that's what by trying to serve rather than trying to make a buck. Serving is a whole different push. It's a whole different thing than a buck.
Oh yeah.
And so if it was just a buck, dude, you wouldn't hear a freaking word out of me. But to serve the greater good, now I'm finding ways to kind of open up the buffet of my mind, or the buffet of my thoughts, as it were.
I don't think you could put a value on your wisdom, Shaun, because again, people spew this stuff, but you live this stuff. It's a whole different ball game.
It's a different thing. Hang on a sec. Just to add to that, the value that or whatever I bring to the table, it pales in comparison to some friends I've got. I mean, what limited things I've done in my life, minor successes that I've had. I know people that people don't know that have lived orders of magnitude fuller lives than I have, who can scale triple mountains in a day.
Mm-hmm.
They're just really impressive human beings, and I don't want anyone to get it twisted out there. I'm a minor bit player in this large opera called life. I have friends who are actual mega opera singers, in the sense of the wisdom that they could sing out to the crowds, as it were.
Before we get going here, when it's all said and done in life, are you happy with it all? Would you say you lived a great life? Would you say you lived a peaceful life?
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I think that the things that I am disappointed with in my past are things that I can't change. And once I started realizing that that's the fact, then I just started focusing on doing my best. And if I'm doing my best, then I mean, I can be bummed that I screwed something up, but I'm not going to be bummed at me because I was trying to do my best at the moment. Like I dropped the ball lots of times on the regular,
Mhm.
but if I'm doing my best, I'm not real hard on myself in the future.
Yeah.
So as I do now in this conversation, I'm trying my best, whatever that means. I'll be able to look back at this. I'll be able to look at the past a year from now and think I was doing my best. So I was kind of stinking up
Yeah.
the conversation a little bit. I wasn't as good in that conversation with Zach as I could be now. So I take satisfaction in that, but I don't beat myself up anymore on when I don't do something quote unquote perfectly. Because I know at that point, that was me expressing my best version of myself. And who can who can call that out as a bad thing? If you're doing your best and you're not cracking it out of the park every second, that's all right. Eventually you'll crack it out of the park.
Oh yeah. That white noise that we talked about, that imposter syndrome, the shitty feeling, the shitty thoughts that come back of the things you can't change. Of course, we can try and do our best today, but what do you do to suppress that noise? Because it can come out of nowhere sometimes. You might be picking up grocery and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I remember that time. That was not
Yeah,
cool.
I used to be really hard on myself on the past. Like I said, in the past, I've made mistakes that I am so regretful of. I
Mhm.
can't change it, man. It's gone. It is literally rear view mirror. And no matter how many times I look into that rear view mirror, it ain't getting any closer. It's only getting further away. And that's what it should be doing, is disappearing into the past, not beating yourself up. Nobody should be beating themselves up as that thing gets so far in the distance you can't see it anymore. Why drag it back?
That's why they say the rear view is so much smaller than the windshield. You just
Correct. Your only responsibility is to hang on to that steering wheel, mash the gas pedal to the floor, stare straight at that windshield, and freaking drive that car like you stole it. And as the past is disappearing into the rear view mirror, just know that you were doing your best at the moment and life is good.
I have a question for you in terms of consistency. You're very consistent, but does that get boring and mundane?
The routine, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It could be boring, except I play the game within the game. My game is as you just described, but I find ways to gamify it. And there's lots of little ways that you can do it. Simple example to do it is time constrain myself, where I've got to expedite things that my normal routine would be predictable and yawnerific, or I can time compress those things and have to execute against that routine in a time compressed manner, whether
Challenges.
I have to dial up the velocity. So I am always looking for ways to tweak the game within the game. I love gamifying the game. This game of life, this the matrix that we're in. If anyone out there is in the matrix and they're kind of just bumbling their way through life, enjoying the matrix for lack of a better term, that ain't enough for me. I want to neo that game. I want to gamify the game. I want to flex the game. You know what I mean?
Well, I do. Well, I should let you get to the bike, and I do appreciate your time as always, Shaun.
But it was great chatting with you. Let's do it
Yes.
again real soon.